What's going on, everybody out there? It's Ron Brown, LMT, the People's Fitness Professional, aka Soul Brother #1, reporting for duty. And we have the brother Magnetic Law in the building. We have
Peace, Almighty. How you?
peace, great. We have Imole in the building, Pan Africanist, and then we're gonna build on Kwame Touré. If I mispronounce something, please fix it. Help me fix that. All right. 7 quotes from Kwame Touré by Emoli. All right. So the first things first, man. When you come in the chat, uh, like, comment, share, subscribe. First off,
Indeed.
we're also pushing the super chats pretty hard right now. We're trying to continuously build this podcast, this platform, and take it to another level. Actually, we had one studio in studio podcasts. We're trying to do more in studio podcasts. We're trying to go around to different groups and film their culture and things like that as well. So support the brand. It's a media brand. It's a media brand. The podcast is just the mother of it, right? And it branches out into other things. So support the brand. Super chat. Let's go into the quotes right now. 7 quotes from Kwame Ture. All right. First off, the first one: we shouldn't lightly dismiss 40 acres and a mule either. Kwame Nkrumah, is that the right way?
Nkrumah.
Nkrumah, right?
Yeah. Right.
Kwame Nkrumah would tell me all libertarians began with land. Working in the Delta, we begin to see clearly how the withholding of these 40 acres had been no trivial blow. All right. In fact, almost exactly 100 years later, the lasting, visible, painful consequences of that betrayal were still undeniable, sketched in our people's condition. Of the many, many betrayals and disappointments African had suffered at the hands of the Republic, I began to see how Congress failed to make good on its promise of those 40 acres to the freemen was arguably the most far reaching and injurious. No doubt about it. So that was the first quote. That was the first one.
Should I enter now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. How I see, how my interpretation is that Kwame was referring to organizing Africans in the southern, in the Delta, for civil rights, in the civil rights and human rights movement in the United States, for voting rights, for to organize politically in independent political organization, and that when he was organizing Africans there, that there was a difference between the attitude of those Africans who were landowners versus those who were tenants on white people's land. And he was saying that those who had their own, who owned the land, they were more confident, they were more enthusiastic about independent political organization, standing up for their rights, and interacting with SNCC organizers. They were easier to organize than those who were living on white people's land, because they were more timid. They were more worried about what the landowners would do if they tried to start attending meetings to organize for voting rights, for other rights. And so I think that land ownership issue is very, very important. And Kwame was alluding to the 40 acres and the mule, and how land ownership affects the behavior and attitudes of people, you know. And so how I understand that particular section is that the denial of that 40 acres and a mule to the Africans, particularly many Africans who even fought in the military of the Union Army, against the Southern Confederacy. Not giving those people land, all those Africans, because those Africans helped the Union Army to win the war. They were losing the war. And so, the Civil War in the States, they were losing the war. And so when the Africans were allowed to enlist in the Union military, within 9 months, they were able to win the war. And so they promised those Africans, that we were going to be able to have 40 acres and a mule with the Freedmen's Bureau. And so those Africans, the land that was supposed to be allocated to Africans was land that was previously held by Southern slave owners. And so that land was supposed to be reallocated for the freedmen. And so when Lincoln was assassinated and Andrew Jackson took over, instead of allowing for those Africans to receive that land and have a land base where they would own the land and be able to cultivate the land and independently facilitate that land, and to some extent, it'd still be under America, but they would still be landowners and have large pockets of land that they own. And so with that situation, that would have, empowered Africans to some extent. And so by changing, and with Andrew Jackson changing and then handing that land back over to the white slave owners, instead of giving the land to those Africans, Kwame Ture is saying that is a great betrayal. It's the betrayal of those Africans, efforts in enabling the Union Army to win that war against the Confederacy. And then following that with the Ku Klux Klan with terrorism against those Africans. And so I think that, to me, by examining Kwame's statement, we could also look at the African population in America in terms of land ownership, because we're not a population who have real ownership over that land. And it's also affecting the attitude of Africans there. You know what I'm saying? Vis-a-vis other populations of Africans, like in Jamaica or in Haiti or in Africa itself. Our population is primarily not landowners. And so that reality affects our attitudes about our nationalism, about our confidence to develop economic infrastructure for our community, to employ our own people, and for our political representation to represent our interests in earnest. So that's how I look at that quote by Kwame Ture, that certainly as Africans, we have to have control over the land. And having control over the land will give us the confidence. Amilcar Cabral used to say, what soil are you? So, and they say ashes to ashes, dust to, we're part of the soil. That's our culture. The soil is our culture. And so our relationship to it, affects us greatly. And so certainly, if we're not controlling land, then that's going to affect us in every aspect, of behavior. And so, to me, that means that we have to fight for land. Like I said in the previous podcast, that, we shouldn't be building castles in the sky instead of fighting for land. And I think that because we're used to not having land ownership, particularly the African population and the snakes, that we are sidetracked and misguided and shooting in the wrong direction when it comes to our struggle and it also helps us to be thinking about nationalism in ways where we're not concentrating on a land base.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not. We're able to be directed towards types of nationalism where there's not actually a land base, a tangible land base involved, or a land that we're controlling, that we can set up a government or some kind of political administration on, which is, putting us in so many different directions, and I think our enemy is clear that we don't have that clarity regarding land ownership and control. And so we're getting, misdirected in terms of the type of nationalism. We're getting this types of religious nationalism and all kind of nationalism and identities, because our identity, our national identity will come from our land base. If we're Ghanaian, then we know that this is the land of Ghana, and this is the territory we're basing being a Ghanaian on, or a Haitian, but we're getting identities from our enemy that are not based on any land base. And we have so much fervor with these identities because of mental slavery. But if we're able to focus on the land, then now our nationalism becomes very clear, like it is for, other people throughout the world.
Okay, now when you speak on land, right, and what do you suggest? Now, I'm assuming you're suggesting repatriation, right? Right?
Yes,
Repatriation.
yes. I'm suggesting repatriation, like
Yeah.
African nationalism.
Okay, so let's say if I wanted to buy land in Ghana, right? The first thing I have to do, would I have to get a visa first off, right? What would be the process?
Well, what the process would be, you'd have to get a visa, yes, to come to Ghana. And I would say do your due diligence. But as an African, you can get access to land in Ghana. You can get access to land in Ghana. In other parts of Africa, you can get access to the land.
Because I'm African, or just because you have you might have the financial capabilities to do so?
I would say the financial capabilities to do so, and also because you're an African. There's ways for Africans to return to Africa and be able to get citizenship in Africa, if you're serious, to be able to get citizenship in Africa. People are returning to Sierra Leone, people are returning to Burkina Faso, people are returning to Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria, Ghana. People are returning home. Significant numbers of people are returning home, and it's going to become more.
Okay, so
It's certainly going to become more. As Africa becomes more independent and unified, our people are going to come home.
I think so. I can see that, because over here, I don't know, it's not looking too good. But when it comes to dual citizenship, what would be the process for that?
Well, you have to apply for dual citizenship. There's people that you can be directed to help educate, Africans about that process. And as we go forward, if you're interested or people are interested, they can be directed to such people.
Gotcha. All right, so we're going to move on to the second quote. So the second quote,
But the land issue, okay. Well, we could go to the
no,
second quote.
go ahead.
The land issue is very important. That land issue is very important. But let's go forward.
Okay. So the chief was a Western educated man, yet strongly invested in a traditional belief and practice, and with impeccable nationalist credentials in struggle. Uh, it is he who, after some differences with a European expert, is said to have exploited in exploit yeah exploited no exploded
Loaded.
exploded in cabinet Mr. President, must I remind you that after all is said and done, Karl Marx is not our ancestor.
I
Can you
like
type the
that.
page number
I like
so the listeners can also, possibly look on with us?
Page 629.
Okay.
Page 629. So this is from a book. If you explain the book, 7 quotes from Kwame Ture. That's the name of the
Mm-hmm.
book.
No,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's just what we entitled this. The book is ready for the revolution, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Ready.
the book
Okay.
is ready
The
for
book
the
is Ready for the
revolution.
Revolution by Kwame Touré. His autobiography.
Ready for the
Yeah.
Revolution is the book, and the
Yeah.
page we just read. The first quote was 288. The second one was 629. So if you want to expound on that, you can.
Oh, okay. We said Karl Marx is not our ancestor.
Right.
I think during that period of time, there were a lot of Africans in Ghana who were subscribing to Marxism,
Mm-hmm.
as ideologically, to direct us towards socialism. And
Mm-hmm.
so during that period, there was an ideological struggle, not just an ideological struggle, but a philosophical struggle as well that was taking place. And, this chief, he was someone who was well educated in Western, in the Western educational system. His name was Nana Kobana Nketia the fourth, and he was the paramount chief of Segundi Takradi. And so he was arguing in cabinet. That's in the legend, not in cabinet. He was arguing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He was arguing because it was in a formal. It was in a formal government setting. In cabinet, yeah, it was in cabinet. Yeah, he was arguing in
Mm-hmm.
cabinet that Marx wasn't our ancestor. So evidently, somebody who was a European was quoting Marx in order to try to make a point to him, and he came out and he said, Marx is not our ancestor. And so how I'm interpreting it is because one of the things that persists in our environments as Africans is an ancestral struggle.
Mm-hmm.
You get me? Where we have foreign people, Europeans, who are imposing their ancestry on us. And just like Trump is putting the names of Pickett and Hood and Lee on military force in America currently, right? These are European ancestors, right?
Mhm.
And so there's an ancestral struggle. And so when we look at education in universities, then you have Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and Nietzsche and Schopenhauer and Beckley and Marx that are being taught to our students, African students in philosophy. If you go into religious arena, you're having Peter and Paul and all of these people, these that are being also imposed on our people, as ancestors. But a lot of these people that we're introduced to all the time, even our children, are exposed to Thor, and a white Isis, and all kind of pagan ancestors in the cartoons. And so, if you look critically at our society, then that foreign ancestors, which is a part of foreign culture, is imposed onto us. making us extensions of them, while our ancestry is being vilified. Particularly, our ancestry is vilified in America, and our ancestry is also vilified even in Africa. And so our ancestry must be respected. And then when we talk about philosophy and ideology, we should be looking to our own experience, our own culture and experience. So ancestry is something that is paramount in our culture. That's why libation is poured in order to honor ancestors. And furthermore, we are actually physically, our ancestry. That's why the DNA can be used to trace ancestry, because we're physically part of our ancestry, and our DNA has memory. That's why we look like our ancestry, and we dance like our ancestry, And so with that, Nana Kobina, he's saying that no, you can't bring marks and then impose marks onto us as if our situation in Africa or in Ghana is the same as your conditions in Europe. So you can't just bring marks just like that without us, looking at our own experience and consciousness, without us looking at our own material conditions, and then our culture, and then our African personality, and then looking at how Marx can be utilized for us to apply, whatever it is of value from his life, from his work, from his theory into our society for our interest, not the interest necessarily of European workers. And so I think that Kwame Ture is putting this in there to make that point raw and clear that, this African chief in cabinet, this is what he said: when all is said and done, Marx is not our ancestor. And so when we're looking at Marx, there's things that we can accept and things that we may not want to accept from Marx.
Can you get some examples?
Well, Kwame Ture used to always talk about the role of religion in revolution. He said that when he was in the South organizing, the only place they could have meetings were in churches. And he said that an old woman would say, if God ain't in this movement, it ain't going nowhere. And so, looking at that situation, Marxism is philosophical materialism according to Marxism-Leninism, and the sole reality of matter necessarily is atheistic or is atheism. And so if we're organizing among Africans who have a strong spiritual orientation, then it's not realistic at this time to try to encourage our people to be atheists as part of our organizing process and as a part of our organizing strategy, And so therefore, we should have a type of strategy or a type of tactics to approach our people who are religious.
Mm-hmm. I remember you told me something back in the day, family. We were talking about religion, and you said in dialectical materialism, it means opposites and how they work together. You said so. If religion can be used for negative things, if it can be the opium of the masses, then it can be used for liberation as well, and that's dialectical materialism. If it can be used for good, it can be used for bad. It's about how the person is using it, how the person is thinking. I never forgot that.
Now I think his screen is frozen. He's gonna have to go out and come back. I would like for you to expound a little bit more on land acquisition, as one of the gods say. Be Knowledge was talking about that Monday. So do you have any idea on how you want to go about doing that? Is your plan to move to Africa? Is that in your plans?
I mean, I just honestly think we need to be functional, family, so that we're able to move across the planet and not just be stuck somewhere. You know. I want to be able to go to the Caribbean if I need to go to the Caribbean. I want to be able to go to India, just all the parts where our people are at. You know, when we need to go to teach, to trade. You know, as Moors are travelers, and wherever we travel, we take knowledge with us. We take culture with us. You know, we take goods and services with us, and everybody's always happy that we came, like Black Santa Claus. You know, and that's what I think has always been one of our best qualities, you know, that we could take goods and services, people that are needed over here, right? And go and take these people from over here and bring them over to where they're needed, most appreciated, you know. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's our role within this, you know, this Black world culture, you know.
For sure.
And then when we stop doing it, the British start doing it. You know, when they captured our trade routes, our shipping routes, somebody else started doing it. That was really what was the beginning of white supremacy, when they captured our trade routes and they cut off our ability for our cities to interact with each other, and they assumed that role. You know,
right?
That's how I see it. Because it needs to be a functional Pan-Africanism, family. Can't be where we just show up. Nah, we need to find the people that Africa needs and then direct them to the different countries where they're needed at. You see? Yeah. I think that'll work a lot better.
All right. So now want to go into the third quote.
Can I land on the second quote?
Yes,
Just
sir.
for what I'm saying is Kwame used to even encourage us to read the Bible, read the Quran, and read the books that our people are into. And so we can look at the principles in those religions and try to harmonize those principles with revolutionary principles. You know, I'll give an quick example. That like the golden rule: do unto others as you have unto others do unto you. And that golden rule is consistent with humanism as a principle, which says treat each person as an end in and of themselves, not merely as a means to an end. You know.
Okay.
So that's a ideological principle. With a philosophical principle, where we're looking at each man as primarily a spiritual being, originally endowed with a certain inward dignity, integrity, and value, which implies duties of a socialist kind. In Christianity and Islam, they're looking at man as being primarily a spiritual being, but they're saying this is the creator spirit in us. In Islam, it says that Allah created mankind of a sounding clay and black mud fashioned into shape, and then put of his spirit in man to make man complete. And in Christianity, it said that man is made of dust, and then God put his Holy Spirit or his living breath in man. And so that spiritual being, you know, we can agree has dignity, has integrity, has value, and that every single person should be respected, you know, along such lines. So there's ways that we can look at people as revolutionaries. We can look at people's spiritual orientation and find commonality in order to organize our people and liberate our society. So I think he's talking about the approach, that how we're looking at each other, and then also how we're looking at organizing our people and relating to our people, and not have an antagonistic type of development between those of us who are maybe traditionalists, Muslims, Christians, or what have you, and not have us set tripping, but rather able to harmonize ourselves for our common interests.
Got you. Makes a lot of sense. All right. Now, you want to go to the third one?
Let's go.
All right. I parted company with nationalists on Dr. King. It seemed clear to me that nonviolent mass action was an effective tactic. I supported any strategy that could move the southern masses of our people to confront American apartheid. Page 111.
Okay. I think that Kwame, on that quote on King, he's doing the same thing that I did, when I was younger. I would quote Malcolm X or Mawali, and speak against Dr. King. And so me and Chris, one time we were walking with Rafiki, and Rafiki was like, nah, we shouldn't take that approach of, saying we're supporting Malcolm X, but we're condemning Martin Luther King. We should look at the positive and negatives in both, and then try to develop out of and advance the struggle that they both waged. You understand? And so so Kwame Ture, he used to always talk about the things that Dr. King contributed to our struggle. He talked about how Dr. King was a great mobilizer, while Malcolm X was a great organizer. And he talked about how Dr. King taught us to face the enemy without fear. Confront the enemy. He said that it was a gift, and a ability of Dr. King to be able to get the people to stand up to the white man in America. They were afraid, timid, they have been terrorized by the Ku Klux Klan and the police. And for Africans to get in the street and stand right face to face with the police in America was a very great accomplishment, and stand up for our actual rights, our right to vote, our right to ride on the front of the bus, and then later the Poor People's Campaign. And so King was, a gifted orator, and he was a person that had a high integrity. He was consistent in what he said. If he said that he's going to be nonviolent, and that's his principle, then he later told America that, they need to be nonviolent in Vietnam, and around the world, in their war machine against poor people all over the world, and called America the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, the American government, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. So Dr. King, I like Kwame said, and I also agree that with non-violence as a principle, rather non-violence as a tactic, because King was being protected by armed guards. So that showed that the people in his organization even didn't agree with nonviolence as a principle. But what he did bring to our struggle was very important and valuable. And Dr. King was like the moral voice. And so you've seen what happened when they assassinated King. What did the people do? What did Africans do all over America? They rose up, and let the enemy know that, we're not just going to just take this lying down with the assassination of King. So they destroyed properties that didn't belong to us, and let them know that, no, we're going to destroy, we're going to do something that is going to, negatively affect you if, for taking out, somebody who is a great, African like Dr. King. And a lot of what Dr. King stood for and what he advocated for and what he, demonstrated was not publicized by the capitalist media. I think that's very important. I think now on social media, some of the presentations and speeches and interviews Dr. King, presented are now being shown on YouTube and those type of things. But like Kwame said, Why We Can't Wait, Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait, and Dr. King came to Ghana. and he met with Kwame. He took pictures with Kwame Nkrumah, and he said that that he supported Ghanaian independence against colonial rule. He was anti-colonialist, and then he even said that what he learned and what he saw in Ghana, inspired him to fight for the rights of Africans, stronger in America. That was in '57. He came to Ghana for independence ceremony. You see, and they were asking him in interview, how do you think about Ghana? He said, well, we wish we could have, what the Ghanaians are having for the Africans in America.
See, that was my impression when I saw his connection to Kwame Nkrumah. I thought he was more. He took more of an impression from Kwame Nkrumah than he did from the guy from India. What's his name?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah, Mahatma Gandhi. I saw our struggle more parallel with the Convention People's Party than Mahatma Gandhi's struggle. I saw it, much closer, and they were both alphas as well. He and Nkrumah.
Yeah, Nkrumah was a Sigma.
Oh, here's a Sigma. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. See, I was close.
Now,
Yeah.
you want to go into the third? No, this is not the. Hold on. How many did we get?
Well, one quick point to make is that so that demonstrates that Martin Luther King was looking at the tactics that he was using in America with Africans, exactly tactically. But on the colonial question, Martin Luther King was clear that Africans have the right to control our land. Africans have the right to independent government. Africans should be sovereign, have the right to national self-determination and sovereignty. And so therefore, King was very clear on those aspects, but he was just looking at the actual conditions of Africans in America and saying, okay, in order to get these Africans to stand up and move forward, this is what we need to do to get us from step A to step B. These are the kind of tactics,
They both very successfully used boycotts and strikes, what we call positive action, to affect change. That's what the one thing they had in common. They used it masterfully, and they had a string of things they were doing, not just one thing. It was like A, B, C, D, E, F. Yeah.
And also, you notice that Martin Luther King never condemned Black Power, and also the SNCC organizers who were, working with him. He was close with some of those youth, like Kwame Ture. So Martin Luther King, was someone who, maybe he was going to be nonviolent, but Deacons for Defense were there, SNCC were there, and like Kwame said, a lot of them were armed. So Martin Luther King, he said for him, Martin Luther King, this is what he's going to be nonviolent. But he was, working with other people who were using various type of tactics and methods. And so he was looking at what he was doing tactically, tactically and strategically. And I think that he was trying to apply certain methods to the conditions in America. So the mistakes Martin Luther King made, like taking nonviolence to the level of a principle, we can correct those mistakes and look at those methods as tactical methods rather than principle, than a principle that like how he looked at it.
Right.
That's something we can learn from that, and then also be able to be more dialectical in the kind of tactics that we, looking at how to be able to work with other African groups. We can be more objective in our approach to struggle and looking at what works. What type of things is effective in being able to advance our interests forward as Africans. What works. And so what Dr. King was doing, it was effective and it was working. And he's saying it right. He's saying it right here. Kwame Ture is saying that Dr. King, his method, what else were we going to do at that time to get Africans to confront the enemy? You know, I've been in demonstrations in America against, you know, against the system, and, you know, confronting those police is no joke because they're terroristic. Their modus operandi is to terrorize Africans. So when you get in the streets and you start organizing on the streets, you know, to confront them, that's not no small thing. Your life is on the line. Your life is on the line. And so, you know, for Dr. King to get all those Africans, Christians, you know, Africans in the South who have been terrorized by Ku Klux Klan and white police, you know, all those years, all these, you know, all this period of time, to get them to confront them on their rights was a very great accomplishment. You know, who else was going to get the Africans to come to the streets, you know, to confront the enemy? And so as the Africans were coming to the streets to confront the enemy, then that created a bigger space for revolutionaries who were armed, like the Deacons for Defense and SNCC organizers and others, to be able to come with their guns, you know, and not, you know, be singled out and targeted so easily.
Right, right.
You understand what I'm saying? And so like Mao Zedong wrote in his book on on guerrilla warfare, Mao Zedong was saying that we need to, revolutionaries need to swim in a big ocean rather than in a small pond.
Say that.
And so by King being able to get the masses to come to the streets, now that is making the ocean bigger for those in SNCC, those in Deacons for Defense, and other, you know, formations to become more active. And it makes it more difficult for the enemy to target some of us that they would be able to target more easily, like how they're naming some Africans as Black identity extremists. You know, if all our people, if the masses of our people are in the streets confronting the enemy, then it's more difficult to target, you know, those who are in the revolutionary intelligentsia, or those who are, you know, very active organizers, very vibrant and active organizers. So that condition is better for us to make change.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Hold on 1 second. So now let's go into the next one. The next one is then he suddenly leaned closer and asked, "When are you African Americans going to repatriate to Africa?" I said, "Well, sir, we are not there yet, but that remains the ultimate goal. But it will surely be in the future as the contradictions continue to develop." Page 601.
That was the conversation he was having with Mao, right?
No, with Ho Chi Minh.
Okay, Ho Chi Minh, pardon me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that quote, I think that it's clear the kind of where our nationalism, because Ho Chi Minh used to sail on ships back and forth to New York, and he heard Garvey speak and was very impressed with Marcus Garvey, and so he was so impressed that it said that he made a financial contribution to the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. And so, and also Ho Chi Minh wrote articles condemning the lynching of Africans in America.
Mm.
He wrote articles. I've read the articles in a book that Ho Chi Minh wrote against lynching of Africans. And so Ho Chi Minh was somebody who had heard Garvey's line, Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad. And when Kwame Ture went to Vietnam, some of the cadres that he met were Marxists, like Marxist-Leninist oriented, you know, and we have that, you know, like Kenyatta was talking about in our movement. We have those who are more nationalist oriented. We have those who are Marxist, you know, various, you know, factions that are looking at socialism as an objective, you know, for our people. That's a better economic system for our people. And so with this, he said those are some, but the question is what type of ideological orientation that they have to guide us to achieve socialism. And so Ho Chi Minh, he had been exposed to nationalism from Garvey and others. And so when Kwame went to Vietnam and he met Ho, that he would first, those other Vietnamese, they were pushing a Marxist line. But when he met Ho Chi Minh was like, well, when are you Africans? When are you African Americans going back to Africa? And so he was like, wow, look at what the man, Ho Chi Minh, leading, the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, against American imperialism and defeating American imperialism. A great, great hero like Ho Chi Minh, And so for him, to say what he said to Kwame Ture, it was very profound and took him aback to hear Ho Chi Minh say such a thing. And so Kwame Ture was like, when he reflected on what Ho Chi Minh was saying, you're right. That's the ultimate goal. Africa is the ultimate goal for African people. And so for those of us who are in the United States, to look and say, where's our nationalism? Which land is ours? What soil are we? We have all these struggles going on now, to a very high extent because of mental slavery and our detachment from our land and the natal alienation that was infused into us in America during the genocide of chattel enslavement. And so that's now trying to tie us to other lands instead of our actual land where we come from. And so that nationalism is African nationalism. That's our nationalism is African nationalism. And so, that is the viable nationalism for our people, and that doesn't mean we can't own land in other locations of the world. And that doesn't mean we can't organize ourselves in other locations in the world. But if you look at the Chinese, you have a model. They have Chinatowns all over in the States, don't they?
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and so that doesn't mean that China is not the base for the Chinese people in America, does it? Just because they have Chinatowns in America, that doesn't mean China is no longer their base for their nationalism. So if you look at Africans in America, it's the same thing, but only because of mental slavery. Chinese don't have mental slavery. That's why the governor, when he won the election in Washington State, where's the first place he went? I think his name was Gary Locke, right?
Yep, Gary Locke. He became the governor.
His screen is frozen again. But I want to end right here. And and come back and build on this. There's a lot of things that I want to build on with the brother Imole and yourself. I think did he come back?
Yeah, he coming back. Yeah, because this is an important subject and it has to be presented in its proper perspective now. It has to be presented in its proper perspective with people who understand the science of revolution and the science of Pan-Africanism, because it is a science, it's not just a philosophy, and it produces exact results. And he has produced exact, precise results. He's not just somebody who's just talking or theorizing. Yeah.
Indeed. So on that note, man, we're gonna click out. Thank you for all who were on the chat. Thank you, Brother Magnetic, for coming on and bringing this brother on. Really appreciate your contribution. And we are out of here. Peace.